Sorry, it was a dumb bit, but it was the only one that I had. And yes, I've held on to this since 2016, so this thing is 6 years old. So obviously, of course, my head has grown significantly in size since then. So yeah, guys, now is finally the time. It is the time to talk about the Batman. Not the 2004 animated series. I'm talking about the new movie that released in 2022 called The Batman. Which, fun fact, is actually the first standalone Batman movie to release in theaters since The Dark Knight Rises back in 2012. Who would have thought? Now, before I get more into this movie, I want to provide a little bit of background to include the more uninitiated as to what exactly the circumstances that led to this movie being created were. Now, originally, this movie was developed as a solo vehicle for Ben Affleck's version of Batman in the DC Extended Universe. The idea was that Ben Affleck was going to direct, write, produce, and star in the movie, and it would have featured Deathstroke as the main antagonist, who would have been played by Joe Manganiello, fundamentally dismantling everything about Batman's life, because he blamed Batman for the death of his son. However, this ended up not happening due to a multitude of reasons. This is mainly due to the fact that Ben Affleck had a lot of personal problems going on in his life, and the fact that at that point in time he had just grown a general disdain for playing the role of Batman, and he felt like the person who should make this movie should have love for Batman for doing this. So he stepped down as director and writer initially. He was going to still star, but eventually he stepped down from that too. And then in comes Matt Reeves to serve as the new director and co-writer of the movie, as he co-wrote the screenplay with Peter Craig. Now, Matt Reeves decided the fact that for this new version of Batman, he wanted it to be a much more younger Batman, and he wanted it to be a Batman that was A, not connected to the DCEU, and B, he wanted it to be a more detective noir-driven story, which is very different from previous Batman movies that very much almost sort of de-emphasized the detective nature of Batman. That was like the one element of Batman that I think that even the best films, like Batman 1989 and The Dark Knight, they kind of lacked that detective element of Batman, but, you know, obviously, of course, he brought it back. Now, while the movie isn't based off of a specific storyline, it does bring in elements from these three comics that I have conveniently on standby. Those three happen to be Batman Year One by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. This obviously speaks for itself. It's Batman Year One. It showcases the more younger and experienced version of Batman. It shows him facing off against the criminal underworld of Gotham, such as Salvatore Maroni and Carmine Falcone, who are both featured in The Batman, with Carmine Falcone being played by the great John Turturro, aka Jesus from The Big Lebowski. Yes, that's a real thing. Look it up. And it also features Batman's relationship with Gordon also developing as well, which is also, you know, really nice. Then we also have the spiritual follow-up to Year One, the 12-issue miniseries Batman and the Long Halloween, which sort of showcased a transitionary period from Batman facing off against gangsters and mafia underworld to the more traditional costumed antagonists such as the Joker, Riddler, Scarecrow, Poison Ivy, the Penguin, and so on and so forth. And it also featured Batman teaming up with Gordon trying to hunt down a serial killer. We'll get into that in a bit. And the final piece of Batman comic material that inspired Matt Reeves is a surprisingly underrated comic that I think more people should read. Batman Ego, which was written and drawn by the late, great Darwin Cook. May he rest in peace. Now, obviously he didn't draw from the specific story of Ego, as, I mean, it literally focuses on Bruce fighting a physical manifestation of Batman. But the general idea is that it focuses on Bruce's psychology about whether or not he should still continue being Batman, because he's been Batman for 2 years in the movie, and yet he feels like he has yet to make an actual difference in his city, and he's wondering why on earth he should keep going. Speaking of which, that actually reminds me of the plot. Now, the plot of the Batman is that we follow Bruce Wayne, who he's been Batman for 2 years now. So he's not Year One level inexperienced, but he's not quite yet the world's greatest detective as we know him to be, as he's trying to inflict out fear and vengeance into the criminals of Gotham City. However, things end up going in an interesting path when a mysterious serial killer calling himself the Riddler begins to target Gotham's elite and its underbelly as well. So, it's up to Batman to figure out who this mysterious Riddler is, while also being able to come to terms about connections to his own past as well. Now, I've been very much interested in this. I've been following the development of this movie for quite some time, and very much like everybody, when I first saw that trailer at DC Fandom 2020, I was blown away. Like, the style that they're aiming for this movie looked very different from most modern day comic book movies. And the approach that they were taking with this movie felt like The Dark Knight or the Nolan movies, except even more grounded and realistic. Like, I would even say that this movie makes the Nolan movies look fantastical by comparison. And after I saw it last week, but the reason why I'm using now to review is because I want it to simmer with me and to have time for it to build. I think this might be the best Batman movie ever made. Now, obviously, don't get me wrong, I have a personal soft spot for Batman 89 and The Dark Knight. I love those movies. Those are my all-time favorites. However, I believe that the Batman is the best for the fact that it's able to simply encapsulate everything that is Batman, and it's able to take what we love about the character and elevate him to new heights. Like, for example, Matt Reeves, through his writing and directing, showcases that he has a clear love and understanding for Batman and the world that he inhabits. And not only that, but speaking of his world, Gotham in this movie looks incredible. Greig Fraser was the cinematographer for this movie, and he was also the cinematographer for Rogue One Star Wars story. He did a couple episodes of The Mandalorian Season 1, and he previously worked on Denis Villeneuve's Dune 2021, and it looks beautifully haunting. Like, this version of Gotham almost looks like a modern-day version of Los Angeles from Blade Runner, even down to the constant rain. And not only that, but Michael Giacchino's score is absolutely amazing. Like, obviously I still have a soft spot for Danny Elfman and his theme created for Batman, but Michael Giacchino's is definitely up there with one of the best Batman soundtracks. Like, I very much, of course, love the theme he created for Batman, and I love how the overall nature of the soundtrack, too, is also incredibly haunting to match the visuals. Like, this is legit a scary movie. Like, the fact that they were able to earn a PG-13 rating at all with a lot of the material that's in this movie is absolutely mind-blowing to me. But I think it works. And not only that, but time to get into the main thing of it all, the performances. Basically, everybody involved did a phenomenal job. Robert Pattinson. When I first heard that he was cast as Batman, I initially thought, wait, the guy from Twilight? Really? He's gonna be Batman? But then, the more I thought about it, and I thought about all the other movies that Robert Pattinson had been in, like Good Time or The Lighthouse, and I think, you know, this guy is legitimately great actor, and he has a great jawline for Batman. And it works. Like, he did a great job here as Batman, because this is obviously a Bruce that still harbors a lot of anger and rage, and Pattinson is able to convey that so well with very minimal dialogue. Like, you could make the argument that this is probably the most Batman speaks, but he's still able to convey a lot just by his facial expressions. That's how good of an actor Robert Pattinson is, when he's able to just use his face. And not only that, but the version of Bruce that we see here feels very broken. And he's almost, like, he's not interested in being Bruce Wayne. He's more obsessed with becoming the Batman, almost as if the Batman was like a drug addiction for him. And the way that he's portrayed as more of a social recluse than a billionaire playboy that has clearly no idea what he's doing, I thought was a very interesting change. As highlighted when Matt Reeves was listening to Something in the Way by Nirvana when writing the movie, and he realized that this is a Bruce that he's gone through a really big emotional tragedy, because he witnessed his parents' murder when he was only 10 years old. That's going to emotionally stunt you and affect you in a big way. So I really thought that this almost Kurt Cobainian approach to Batman, to Bruce specifically, was really well done. And also, as a big Nirvana fan, loved the implementation of Something in the Way. It was great. And not just that, but Zoe Kravitz as well. I thought she did a phenomenal job as Catwoman. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Michelle Pfeiffer in Batman Returns. I can't speak for Anne Hathaway because I've never seen Dark Knight Rises. But I think Zoe Kravitz has the potential to be the best live-action Catwoman. Yeah, I said it. Another thing I want to mention too is that I love the fact that like for a lot of these characters you're beginning to see their beginnings. Like Batman we know is in his second year, but for his rogues gallery and a lot of his supporting cast we're seeing their evolutions. Like for example, Catwoman in this movie, she's not Catwoman, she's just Selena Kyle, a common cat burglar and nightclub worker. And Paul Dano as the Riddler, who we'll get into in a bit, you know, he's just starting out as well. And Oswald Cobblepot in this movie, he's not the criminal underworld crime lord that we know him to be. He's just Carmine Falcone's right hand, and he doesn't even like being called the Penguin. And obviously, of course, Jim Gordon in this movie, he's not yet Commissioner Gordon, he's Lieutenant Gordon. Like, I really like the fact that you're slowly beginning to see the beginnings of a lot of these famous Batman characters. And speaking of which, holy moly, Paul Dano as the Riddler was horrifying. Like, spoilers for the opening scene of the movie, I guess, but in the opening shot when you're in Mayor, like you see someone, like it's somebody's watching someone's house, and then it's revealed that it's Mayor Mitchell of Gotham, who's the mayor of Gotham, and then you see him watching a TV with recent mayoral candidate Bella Real, and then like you see him like he's looking at the TV and whatnot, and then he moves away, and then you just see the Riddler standing behind there, and the TV reflection on his glasses makes it look like he has just pure white eyes, and it is legit like Paul Dano gave a horrifying performance as the Riddler. It was great because I'm surprised at the fact that we haven't seen a live action Riddler since Batman Forever, like with Jim Carrey. I'm surprised we haven't gotten a modern day serious grounded interpretation of the Riddler, who very much feels like the Zodiac killer in this movie, and he did great. Jeffrey Wright, for example, Jeffrey Wright, you know, who's a fantastic actor from stuff like Westworld and What If, as he played the Watcher, was also great as Gordon. But by far, the biggest surprise to me was Colin Farrell as the Penguin. If you had told me that the person in this movie was Colin Farrell, and I did not know previously, I probably wouldn't have believed you, because I would have looked at the side-by-side pictures and I'm like, wait, that's the same guy? Which just goes to show the incredible makeup and prosthetics that were used on Colin. Like, the makeup and production and prosthetics team did a great job because he was amazing and he was unrecognizable as Oswald Cobblepot. And I'm really excited for that HBO Max show that they're going to be doing of him and his rise, his almost Scarface level story of him becoming a crime lord. I'm really looking forward to that. And obviously, of course, Andy Serkis, who is a frequent collaborator with Matt Reeves, obviously having done Caesar and Planet of the Apes. I thought he was great as Alfred, you know? But this does begin to transition into sort of the complaints I have with this movie. One being, I wish we'd gotten to see more of Andy Serkis as Alfred, because he's a great actor, and the Alfred that they're portraying in this movie is very different compared to previous Alfreds. In fact, it very much feels like the Alfred from the Batman Earth 1 graphic novels that were written by Jeff Johns and drawn by Gary Frank. But I just wish the fact that we'd gotten to see more of him in the movie. And then there's also the big issue of its runtime. With credits, it's 2 hours 55 minutes. Without, it's 2 hours 47. It's able to just barely, by like 5 minutes, beat Dark Knight Rises as the longest Batman movie ever made and the third longest comic book movie ever made. Only behind Avengers Endgame and Zack Snyder's Justice League. And there is a point in the movie in which it feels like naturally it should end, but then it keeps going, and then there's this big action sequence towards the end, and I'm like, this is really well put together and really well made, but like, it feels like the movie should have ended by now. Well, why is it still going? But that did not make me deter from my enjoyment of this movie. Like, that's the thing about movies you love. You realize the fact that in spite of their flaws, you still love them. Like, I find it ridiculous the fact that there are multiple times in this movie when Batman repeatedly gets shot in the chest with bullets, and yet out of not once do any of the thugs think, you know, maybe I should try shooting him in the exposed area that is his face/chin. Like, none of the thugs think that at all. But that doesn't deter from my enjoyment of the movie. That just goes to show about how well the movie is able to entertain. Like, the purpose of a movie is to entertain. If it fails in entertaining you, then it fails in its job. You're able to notice more of the flaws as they're happening on screen. However, if a movie is successfully able to entertain you, you won't think about the actual flaws in this movie until you've had a hard think about it. Like, after watching it, it's like, you know what, maybe this part didn't work nearly as well as I initially thought it would. And yeah, to sum up, The Batman is an absolutely fantastic movie. From incredible action sequences to a very gripping detective story, from a very noir-driven detective story, beautiful and haunting visuals and soundtrack, and superb performances from everybody around, The Batman is a masterpiece. I'm saying it. This is the new gold standard for Batman movies. I'm saying it right now. And I'm super excited to see whatever follow-ups this movie ends up getting. Like, I'm excited for that Penguin HBO Max show that's happening. I'm really intrigued to see about that Arkham Asylum series that's currently in the works. And I hope that we get to see a trilogy of Batman films. And I'm hoping the fact that they continue in utilizing Batman villains that haven't been used before. Like, I want to see a live-action version of The Court of Owls. And I want to see a live-action version and more serious interpretation of Mr. Freeze. I think that would be great. Like, the possibilities about where this movie can go are endless. Like, if you haven't seen The Batman yet, what is wrong with you? Go see The Batman. It is amazing. But, yeah, I think that's probably where I'm going to take it to a close for now, because my throat is really dry because I've been talking for almost 17 minutes now. So, yeah, I appreciate all of you watching. So to close out, thanks again. Make sure to subscribe and to hit the little notification bell to make sure that you don't miss out on any future uploads. Make sure to give a little like and comment if you feel so inclined. You don't have to, but, you know, would be severely appreciated, and it would help out the YouTube algorithm a lot because, you know, that's the thing. But, yeah, that about concludes my video talking about the Batman. So, yeah, see you around, and, as always, stay gold.